Greetings, everyone, and welcome to episode number 22 of the Pan Future Society podcast. I am your host, Sean, as always, and today is Saturday, October 22nd, 2016. I actually didn't do that on purpose. Episode 22 on the 22nd. What a coincidence. It's the small things that make me smile. So, I wanted to start out this week with something related to robotics talk from last week, and we'll be continuing this week. The Uncanny Valley. And if you're unfamiliar with the Uncanny Valley, I will link to the Wikipedia article about it. It's a very good description of the full details of it. But in short, the Uncanny Valley is our sense of familiarity with something that looks sort of human or not, and whether or not we are disturbed or repulsed or think it's weird looking. And this can happen not just with robots, but with people. You know, if you have an experience of meeting someone who has Down syndrome or burn scars or something like that, this uncanny valley is a way to describe our reaction to that, and whether or not knowing about it, I think, is a good foot through the door in deciding whether or not this is something we need to conquer. Because obviously, if we feel revulsed at someone who has Down syndrome, then there's something wrong with us that we need to work on. But anyway, related to robots, this uncanny valley explains why we kind of have no real reaction to an industrial robot. It's just an arm moving car parts around. It's like, okay, whatever. It's a machine. Then that scale goes up. Our familiarity with it. We feel a sense of self-recognition in the thing a little bit more as it becomes a humanoid robot, which explains why we're okay with C-3PO or Asimo or anything that's, you know, 2 arms, 2 legs, and a head, but still fairly obviously machine. Then the familiarity goes up, and then it plunges through the floor when you get to something like a corpse or a zombie, or like a robot with a weird plastic skin and empty dead fish eyes or something like that. That becomes something that's very close to looking just like a person, but there's something really wrong about it to us. So we have sort of that gut reaction to be repelled by it. And then it creeps and shoots way back up as you get back to, you know, a normal person. Our familiarity becomes high with that, with a regular person again, or with, and that's a place that robots haven't quite crossed yet, that humanoid look. Later on, I will be talking today about robots in Japan, and they do have some very lifelike humanoid robots. They're, I think, climbing out of the uncanny valley rather than falling down into it. So progress is being made, and some criticisms of the uncanny valley idea include that the idea that it's a cultural thing, that we can learn to not be repelled by something, or that it depends on how we grew up, or our generation, or our age. It's sort of like the Douglas Adams aphorism I mentioned, that, you know, if something's in the world when you're born, it's completely normal. So weird-looking, you know, dead fish-eyed robots might seem completely normal to someone who is now, you know, 10 years old, because they've always been around. But that's the uncanny valley. Go read about it. Be aware of it. Not only when you're looking at robots and things like that, but just in your daily life. If you're having a negative reaction to the way someone looks, you know, people don't choose to have burn scars. So in terms of, I guess I can connect this with our need to have a free and fair civilization. and be more kind to each other. Be aware that this uncanny valley effect is something that we experience, and for the most part, it's unconscious. So just make note of it when it happens. All right, that is the rambly bit, and now on to the news of the moment. The first bit of news this week: the European Space Agency, ESA, has apparently had a setback with its ExoMars mission and its Schiaparelli spacecraft. It was set to land on Mars a few days ago and has apparently crashed. They lost contact with it shortly before it was supposed to land, and some photos of the landing area from one of the orbiting spacecraft there appear to show several spots where there might be a parachute and maybe an small impact crater from a crash landing. It seems to be possible that the deceleration thrusters shut off too early, the parachute might have opened too early, and if it landed too hard, it may have also exploded the remaining fuel on board. Those are some of the possibilities for whatever reason. Now, the Schiaparelli spacecraft was a test to specifically test ways of landing things on Mars. It's tricky. It's hard to do, partly because of the very thin atmosphere. It's very hard to slow down because there's not a lot of stuff to slow yourself down against, such as there is in our thicker atmosphere. So they were testing some new ways of getting spacecraft on the ground, and apparently for one reason or another it didn't work. It may be just a software problem, or something might have gone wrong elsewise. But this mission is not a total failure because this is only a small part of the ExoMars mission. The spacecraft for ExoMars that is still orbiting the planet is still going to be doing its job of examining Mars's atmosphere and collecting data on that. So, slight setback there. Our second piece of news, staying somewhat with Mars and getting back to robots. MIT is saying that they are programming humanoid robots to help explore Mars. In November of last year, NASA gave MIT one of their Valkyrie humanoid robots, and MIT's Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence Laboratory has been developing special algorithms that will allow these robots to help out during future Mars missions. This is part of NASA's Centennial Challenges programs, which awards prizes for these competitions, and they'll be doing things in simulated environments. Among the other things that they will be doing, some of their primary tasks will be aligning a communications array, repairing a broken solar array, and identifying and repairing a habitat leak. So robots may be helping us out when we do finally get to Mars. But this does make me wonder, again, sort of back to the uncanny valley idea and of robot designs. Why would you need humanoid-looking robots? Seems that the desire to build a human-looking robot just seems to be sort of an innate human thing for people who build robots and want to work on robotics. It's like there's a special challenge there to make a robot that functions in the world much the same way that we do. Which is interesting. I think developing that technology is a useful pursuit, especially in getting things to walk on only two legs. That's a particular challenge for robotics. But in terms of their function in doing things on Mars or doing any jobs, is it the best design? Maybe it's a human advantage that our own body layout allows us to be very flexible in the different kinds of things that we can do, and maybe a robot that can align communications array and fix holes in a habitat, um, and do all those different things, do multiple different kinds of things. Um, Maybe a human-shaped design is actually efficient for that. I guess we will have to wait and see how these MIT robots work out. So that is your news of the moment. All right, getting into the main segment this week, all about robots in the real world. Just a quick addition to last week's robots. Both China and South Korea use robots for security in jails and other security situations. China's Anbot can be armed with a, quote, electrically charged riot control tool, end quote, likely something like a taser or a cattle prod. The Anbot resembles the Nightscope robots in form, or maybe with its cattle prod extended, it would look like a Dalek from Doctor Who. The Korean robot has software that is meant to observe changes in behavior and assess the emotional state of inmates. This robot looks like a strange combo of a copy machine and Doctor Who's canine robot dog. So there's a few more robots in the real world right now, and you might see them if you ever get in trouble with the law in China or South Korea. On to the land of the rising sun. After getting far into my research for last week's show, it became clear I'd need a show just for Japan. Well, I'm sure I haven't covered all the robots around us yet. There are a lot more coming soon. Robot chefs, fast food workers, personal assistants. But many of these are still being developed, unless you live in Japan. They are far beyond anyone else in the world in terms of having robots in their daily lives, in my opinion. I didn't find very specific information about smaller scale commercial robots in use in Japan, but I would think that robots like the Roomba are at least as common there as they are here in the United States. The robots I've selected for this week are, of course, considered in addition to the many industrial robots Japan has had for decades in manufacturing, logging, and warehouse work. Aside from the bots mentioned last week, one group of robots you could interact with right now in Japan are used in hotels. One hotel in particular is the Henna Hotel, or Weird Hotel. These robots were adopted to save on labor costs, but go beyond simple screens and R2D2 domes. At check-in, you may speak to a human female-looking robot, a dinosaur, or, I think, a sort of cute Robo-Sapien-looking robot. A robot arm you might see in manufacturing will help you store your items in a locker in the lobby, and a robot trolley will carry your bags for you. In each room, there is a little tulip-shaped robot that can give you weather updates and tell you the time. The owners of the hotel are also working on robots for room service and snack deliveries, both a block-shaped robot inside and drones outside. If all that were not enough technology, the rooms are locked by facial recognition rather than keys. There are still a number of humans on staff, but the company hopes to get robots doing 90% of the work in the near future. And it's interesting that you would think it would actually be possible just to walk up to a screen and check in at a hotel, do some sort of touch screen thing. But they've chosen to put robots in there that you had actually talk to. I don't know if it makes the transition from human to robot seem more normal, or if it just is more interesting to go to that hotel rather than just pushing buttons on a screen or something. There are also a number of robots at work in restaurants in Japan, and also some of the articles I read included China in the restaurant robots category. In some cases, they're supplementing human workers, but in others, the customer service process is entirely handled by robots from start to finish, from ordering to payment and pickup. All the way back in 2009, a restaurant opened in Nagoya, Japan, used robots as its chef. It looks like these robots are mostly just sort of arms, like you would see in a car manufacturing plant. But the robots are fully autonomous, taking customer orders and cooking it from start to finish. That includes boiling noodles, pouring broth, adding spices and toppings, and so on. The orders are complex, too, requiring the robots to take customer preference for amount and type of sauce, salt, noodles, and so on. And the finished product is given to a human server who brings the food to your table. The robots take about 1 minute and 40 seconds to cook a bowl of noodles, and these robots are serving, as of the time of this article, 80 bowls a day. The restaurant is called Fuamen. My pronunciation is horrible. Again, in Nagoya, Japan. I don't know if it's still in operation. But this was, 7 years ago that this went into effect. There's also a sushi chain called Kura, and it's prides itself on efficiency. In 1995, when they opened their first restaurant, they used conveyor belts to cut down labor cost. Conveyor belts have been used since the 1950s, and there's actually a conveyor belt sushi place here in my part of Oregon, and it's kind of cool. But at Kura now has moved to using some robots in this process as well. Diners use a touch panel to order soup and other side dishes, which are delivered to tables on special express conveyor belts. In the kitchen, a robot busily makes the rice morsels for a server to top with cuts of fish that have been shipped from a central processing plant where workers are trained to slice tuna and mackerel accurately down to the gram. Diners are asked to slide finished plates into a tableside bay where they are automatically counted to calculate the bill, doused in a cleaning fluid, and flushed back to the kitchen on a stream of water. So that's one robot in the process here. The sushi chain also has their central management for this is in a central control center with a video link, so that even removes a few more humans, not only to manage the restaurant itself, but also to manage the robot and make sure it's working right. I also found mention of a robot in China that they've built and sold to work in noodle bars. The robot there costs about $1,500, which it really is not that much when you consider it's an employee that you don't have to pay and can work without stopping. There are plenty of other companies, both fast food and restaurant companies and robotics companies, developing technology for this kind of work, both in Japan and elsewhere. And it's really probably one of the biggest changes we'll see in the next 10 years, I think, is robots being used to cover pretty much every type of customer service job. And that is going to be very disruptive to what we've taken for granted as our way of life. Also in Japan, healthcare and elder care robots are quite popular and quite highly developed. Japan is undergoing a crisis of healthcare worker shortages, along with a shrinking and aging population. There are a number of robots in development, but mostly not widespread yet. They range from small stuffed animal-like creatures to comfort people with Alzheimer's, play games and dance to keep people active, a large robot with a bare face that can lift patients and carry them around, and a humanoid robot that people can talk to about their problems. I also read an article about a robot called Pepper that can recognize and respond to human emotions. Pepper kind of looks like some sort of weird ghost baby thing. It's sort of a bundle with a almost a kabuki like face. And the humanoid robot also looks a little bit odd. I think it's a definite sign that the uncanny valley has cultural roots. People in Japan seem far more comfortable with robots of a wide variety of designs. Going along this same line, a company, somewhat unfortunately, named Cyberdyne, is developing assistive limbs that read electrical impulses on the skin and can help the elderly get around. Some of these healthcare bots are more in the development stage, but probably only a few years from widespread use. I do also believe that the stuffed animal like ones are actually pretty widespread in Japan now. They've been selling for a number of years. I've often marveled at Japan and its culture. Japan, for many years, has seemed like they're living slightly in the future, and that looks like it's continuing with their robotics development. I've often wondered if it's a result of not spending most of your national budget on your military. All right, that is your show for the week. As always, thank you so much for joining me. Thanks for listening. Thanks for getting in touch with me on Facebook and Twitter. Do go to the website, panfuture.org. Email me at sean@panfuture.org. You can hit the PayPal button there if you'd like to donate to help out the show, or drop me an email to find out how you can help. And like I said, find us on Facebook and Twitter. Yeah, that's it. All right, everybody, have a great day. I will talk to you again in the future.